All right, today we are diving into a really harrowing report out of Brooksville, Florida. It's a story that starts with a simple accusation and just spirals into a night of alleged kidnapping and, frankly, torture in a wooded encampment. Held captive and tortured. I mean, just let those words sink in. These are the two chilling phrases that a man named Christopher Hill used when he finally spoke to sheriff's deputies. And really, those words set the stage for this entire awful story. So our story doesn't actually start in the woods where this all went down. It begins at the exact moment Christopher Hill finally managed to get help. On that day, he walks into a hospital and tells the staff this unbelievable story. He says he'd been held against his will and viciously assaulted by a group of people he was living with, fellow transients. And right away, the doctors knew this was serious. I mean, really serious. They found an active brain bleed. That is a life-threatening injury, and it immediately escalated everything. He had to be transferred to a specialized trauma center right then and there. So you have to ask, right? What could possibly lead to an attack this brutal? Well, according to the arrest affidavit, it all comes down to a confrontation that started hours before the violence. It really boils down to two completely different stories. The group accused Hill of secretly taking pictures of kids at a nearby Aldi's. Hill, on the other hand, insisted he was just taking casual group photos and absolutely denied doing anything wrong. You know, whatever the truth is about what happened at that store, things took a really dark turn once they all got back to their camp in the woods. What started out as just an argument and accusation, well, it exploded into physical violence. So Hill tells detectives what happened next, and it is just a nightmare. He says he was ambushed, literally forced onto a couch out there in the campsite, and then for hours was subjected to a prolonged and brutal attack by 4 specific people. And that brings us to the 4 people detectives say were responsible. You've got Michael Hoskins, Rachel Toman, Mary Murray, and Christopher Hoffman. According to the report, the violence kicked off with Michael Hoskins. He allegedly pressed a pocket knife right to Hill's throat, making it very clear from the jump that this was a life-or-death situation. And when Hill tried to get away, that's when Christopher Hoffman allegedly stepped in and started strangling him. Hill later told investigators he's pretty sure it was a blow to the head from Hoffman that caused that critical brain bleed. Then you have Mary Murray. The affidavit paints this really disturbing picture of her tormenting Hill all night, using lighters and even heated screwdrivers to burn him, supposedly to keep him from passing out from the pain. And finally, the 4th person, Rachel Toman, she's accused of not just joining in on the beating, but of issuing a direct death threat, telling Hill point blank he was not going to leave those woods alive. So how did this night of terror even end? Well, the investigation quickly zeroed in on the suspects, and, maybe surprisingly, what they admitted to. Somehow, after all of that, Hill wakes up and he's alone. From there, he manages to drag himself to a nearby store, see just how bad his injuries are, find a friend, and then finally make it to the hospital. And that's what kicked off the whole police investigation. And get this, that investigation moved incredibly fast. The attack starts on July 21st. Hill gets to the hospital on the 22nd, and by the very next day, the 23rd, deputies had already arrested 3 of the suspects at the camp. The last one, Hoffman, was picked up in September. Now this is where it gets really interesting. When the deputies start questioning the suspects, their own words start to back up parts of Hill's story. Tomarine literally uses the words jumped and tortured. Hoskins admits the attack happened and even describes what Murray was doing as torturing. And Murray herself admits she took Hill's phone and saw him get punched unconscious. So, okay, given the severity of the injuries and the suspect's own statements, what kind of legal trouble was this group in for? Well, as you can imagine, the charges were serious. We're talking major felony charges here. Aggravated battery, which is for causing those life-threatening injuries, false imprisonment for holding him captive, and armed robbery, which probably comes from them taking his phone during the knife-point assault. But here's a twist in the legal process. As of the time of this report, despite those heavy charges, only one of the suspects, Mary Murray, is still in jail without bond. The other 3, Hoskins, Toman, and Hoffman, were all released on bond while they await trial. The one piece of good news in all of this is that the victim, Christopher Hill, has recovered enough to give more statements to the police.
But of course, the long-term physical and, psychological damage from an assault like this is just impossible to know.
So, all of this leaves us with a really big, kind of uncomfortable question. When you look past the grim details of this specific case, what does an incident like this tell us about how conflict gets resolved and how justice is carried out inside marginalized communities that often exist totally separate from official systems? It's definitely something to think about.